Our next speaker is a gentleman that I met yesterday. The board of directors had a very small innovation roundtable here at the Rockingham County Fairgrounds yesterday, and I was invited to attend that for a little while. And one of the speakers I heard was our next speaker here on the platform. Jim Hoorman comes from the state of Ohio, and he was with the Ohio State University Cooperative Extension for more than 2 decades. He then put in several years with the USDA's NRCS. He is a guy that knows what's going on out in the field where you work every day. He knows about cover crops. He sells cover crops. He sells equipment related to cover crops. So he has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure he's going to share that with us today. So please help me as we welcome Jim Hoorman.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Well, thank you for inviting me. This is my 3rd trip to Virginia. Unfortunately, it's always in the winter. I do have to say, when I got off the plane, I realized that just like Dorothy, I'm not in Kansas anymore, I'm in Virginia. And about the first thing that happened was I was looking for the door and some guys, just go through that door, son, you'll be okay. And I'm like, okay. So I went through and pretty soon he gets out of me, he says, where are you from? I said, Ohio. And you know what he said to me? Oh, you're one of those. You're a Buckeye, you're a Yankee, and you got an accent. I thought, oh my golly. Then you know what I found out? He wasn't even from Virginia. He's from that state up north. He's from Michigan, okay? And I don't know if you know anything about Ohio State and football, but we just don't like the state up north, especially about that 4th Saturday in November, okay? So they kind of are our archmen. And then I had the great pleasure of meeting a real true Virginian, and that was Clay, and he took me back, and I've had a chance to be with Clay and his family for most of this. So thank you for that Southern welcome. Well, now, what are we gonna talk about? They asked me to talk about 4 things. I said 4 things in 40 minutes. Why don't we just add world peace on there too, okay? Now, I've already seen that my grandfather, Ray right over here, I call him my grandfather for one reason. I worked on a PhD at Ohio State, and he taught Rafiq Islam, and Rafiq Islam taught me, so he's kind of like my grandfather, even though we're probably not that far off in age, okay? So that's the way it works in grad school. Things kind of go around. I may skip some of the cover crops because we're probably going to run out of time, okay? So here is what I was looking for. Let's switch this. Let's talk about that ideal soil composition, okay? And ideally, about 50% of it should be solid, 50% of it should be pore space, all right? And now that pore space, ideally 25% is gonna be water, 25% is air. Now, if it floods, it's gonna be all water, and if it's really, really dry out, you're gonna have a lot less water in there, okay? But ideally, and when we originally probably came to this country, a lot of our soils were probably in that 4, 5, even 6% soil organic matter range, okay? And why is that important? When we talk about soil compaction, we're looking at that solid portion. And what's the highest level of compaction that you have? We always talk in bulk density. And bulk density is based in the metric system on grams per cubic meters cubed. Okay, so we're looking at the weight divided by the volume. The highest number is about 2.65. So ideally, what you want in your soil is a number somewhere around 1.3 to 1.35 if you're gonna get about 50% pore space, okay? So that's why that organic matter is so important. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Here's typical bulk density and the compaction, okay? And look at what that number is. After we've tilled it, this is a plow layer, it's at 1.43 because we burned up, we oxidized a lot of that organic matter. And we'll show you how much volume that takes up. If we originally started at 5, where are we at today? We're probably closer to 2, maybe 2.5. Now, some guys I was talking to yesterday said they were up to 3, And a few guys had already gotten up to back to that 4 and 5% range, and they had much, much more productive soils, okay? But now we have this plow pan. And I don't know if you guys have been farming long enough, you probably tilled it at one time, another, but now you're using the cover crops. Maybe you're getting down and you're breaking up that plow pan. But I can go just about anywhere in Ohio, and we're from Ohio. I'm from a whole different state. We're a lot flatter. 0 to 2, 2 to 6 is kind of the ground slope that we have around here. I don't even want to imagine what you guys are farming. It'd probably scare the bejeebers out of me, all right? But what do we have? We're getting up to 1.9, 1.87, 1.84, okay? And I'll show you some numbers here pretty soon. We'll show you what that does to the roots, all right? That's too dense. Why is there a plow pan there? It's because of the tillage. When we till the soil, especially the clay particles, they get in there and they set up just like cement. So I'm going to do a little demonstration. I'm going to put this down. Imagine my hands are bricks. These are made out of what? What are bricks made out of? Made out of clay. And if I put in between these two bricks, which are really hard and dense, put in a sponge, I can squeeze that and it'll come right back, okay? That sponge is your organic matter, all right? Now imagine these two bricks. If I burn off the organic matter, what charge do we have on these two bricks if it's made out of clay? Negative charge. And if I take a positive ion like potassium or magnesium, okay, what's gonna happen? This is just like cement. It's gonna set up like a brick wall. Okay? And that's what happens when we do the tillage. We burn off the organic matter and we smear that subsoil. And when we do that, what do we form? A brick wall. Okay? And that's why that number is so high. Okay? That's what we're talking about here when we're talking about bulk density. This is the ideal bulk density. On a sand, has to be less than 1.6. On a silt, has to be 1.4. On a clay, has to be almost down to 1.1. That's for ideal growth. The bulk density that restricts roots is only about 0.2 higher. 1.8, 1.65, 1.47. What were we on that original slide? If I could go back, 1.43. Okay, so our roots are struggling in that tilled soil. We got to add the organic matter to give it a little bit better bulk density, okay? Here's 4 compaction factors. I've already talked about the one. We talked about the sheet compaction. Every time you till a soil, no matter what the depth, discs are really bad because they ruin your soil structure. But heavy equipment, we all know that. That's where the wheel traffic is. But I can go in any field and find compaction evenly almost distributed across that field. Why is that? Because that's the level of your tillage equipment. Rain, precipitation is another factor that will cause compaction, and gravity. Okay, gravity. Think about if I plow a field and what happens? That ground settles. Now it may not be real settle, it may not be real high, but it will settle with time and that will compact your soil. Okay, is there a visual way to measure soil compaction? I was doing this when I was working on my PhD, and we were talking about soil compaction, and I came back home, and I was driving. It's a 2-hour drive to get back home, okay? And I was taking a class, and I noticed there was a fence row there. And you know, there was a 6 to 9 inch elevation. Now, some of you are probably thinking that's soil erosion, but this is on flat ground, okay? So really flat ground, 0 to 2%. And I took a tape measure out there, measured it. If we have 6 to 9 inches of elevation difference, go look at your fields. Have they settled? Just look at where your fence row is or where the road ditch is, and notice if there isn't an elevation difference. If it's 6 to 9 inches of elevation difference and we burned up all that organic matter, that's a 50% void space. That equals 3 to possibly as much as 4.5 inches of pore space that we have wasted that we cannot now store water in. Okay, our soils have compacted that much, okay? And that's what's happened over time due to all the tillage that we've had. Why is this so important? I'm only gonna hit the highlights here. 1% soil organic matter by weight takes up 5% soil volume. If I have 2%, that takes up 10% of the soil volume. If I was up to 4%, look, I would have 20% of the soil volumes taken up by something that's like a sponge that holds not only water, but it also holds a lot of nutrients. What else is so important about that pore space? Can anybody tell me? Gas exchange, okay? And I'm gonna do this really quick. Carbon is one of our most limiting factors, okay? If I were to grow 200 bushel corn, how much carbon do I need to grow that 200 bushel corn on 1 acre of land per day on average? About 100 pounds. Where does that 100 pounds come from? If you say the air, you're partially right, but in order to get at 410 parts per million, you need an area that's 32 cubic acres of air to get 100 pounds of carbon out of that carbon dioxide. So where does the carbon dioxide originate? Let's think about this. With photosynthesis, we've got these leaves out there taking in oxygen into the stomata underneath the leaf, taking in carbon dioxide, giving off oxygen, right? What happens in the soil? Sucking in oxygen, the roots are taking oxygen to burn the carbohydrates for respiration, and the microbes are doing the same thing, giving off carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide level in the soil is somewhere between 3,000 to 10,000 parts per million, and at night, that can actually raise up and be released in the morning 20,000 to 30,000 parts per million, okay? So it's real important to have live roots in the soil and to have high biology to get that. Now, how long does that carbon dioxide last? The sun comes up and within 1 to maybe 2 hours, you're burning up most of your carbon dioxide, and the rest of the day, your corn kind of goes dormant, just can't use it because it don't have, it's a just-in-time system, don't have enough carbon dioxide to get us at 3, 4, 5, maybe 600 bushel corn is possible if we had enough carbon dioxide in the soil. That's why you want to build your soil, and that's why soil compaction is so important, okay? It's a lot less dense, holds a lot more air and water. This is just kind of an old chart. Some people have kind of poo-hooed it a little bit. We're not sure, but I still like it because it is data, it's published, and it shows that on a sandy soil, if you have 1% organic matter, you get about 1 acre-inch of water. Silt loam, you get about 1.9, and on a silty clay loam, about 1.4, okay? If I can get that up to right around 5%, yes, the numbers go down per percent organic matter, but you're still at 2.5, 4, and 3 acre-inches extra water that you're gonna have in that soil profile. And believe me, when we're in the middle of a drought, that is really important, okay? Let's keep moving. Let's just show you what happens with water infiltration. This is a picture that shows what I wanted to show, but it's not taken at the exact site. Look what happens on a conventional tilled field. This is water coming off that. See, it's very dirty. It's got a lot of nutrients in it. Here off this no-till field, we're actually showing that the water's coming off. We did some research, not at this site, and they did this at Coshocton. They checked it over a 20-year, was it 20 years or 40 years? It doesn't really matter. It might have been 40-year time period by now. I don't remember that fact, but they had 1,500 inches of water run off a conventional tilled field. Where they converted it to no-till, and they didn't have a cover crop in there, just no-till, how many acre-inches of water ran off of that side? It's not this picture, it's a different site, okay? 7 inches. And that all happened within the first 1, 2, 3 years until that soil healed itself. So it shows you the benefit of having that no-till. And if you want to do even better, put the cover crop on there so you got the sponge so that you can lap up that water and hold it in that soil profile. That's what we're trying to do. This is some information from Ohio State University. It just shows you that if you plow a soil, you'll get about a 1/4 inch of water infiltration. No-till by itself on a bare soil is even worse, only 0.1, okay? Why is it so low? because what happens is on a no-till field without any residue on it, it bridges. The sand, the silt, the clay, especially on our soils, those clay particles will bridge over and it will now allow the water. Once you get up to about 40% cover, now we get close to a ½ inch. And when we get to no-till, we get right around 1 inch of water infiltration. Okay, that's data on a soil that was done in Ohio. Okay, so residue helps prevent those soil crusts, allows the water to infiltrate. All right, here's something I really liked. I found this from Arizona. The speed of water is very important. If I double the speed of water, how many more nutrients will travel with that stream of water? If I go 2 to the 6th power is 64 times, okay? So if I go from 1 mile per hour to 2 mile per hour, I'm going 64 times more. If I go from 2 to 4, if the water's traveling that fast, I can go 128 times more nutrients. From 4 to 8, 256. From 8 to 16, 512. And from 16 to 32, that's 1,000 times more nutrients. We have measured the speed of water in some of our rivers and streams, and some of it is somewhere between 16 to 20 miles an hour, right in the middle where it's moving the fastest. Now, it tends to settle out a little bit more as you get away from the center, but it is possible to move great volumes of soil very quickly in there. So you want to try to slow that water down. How do you do that? No-till, get that water to go down. The cover crops, that's how you're going to be able to absorb it as a sponge, keep that water in that soil profile. So those are the things that we want to look at. And this just shows what happens when we get a flood. We like to call this on the side conventional tillage. You'll notice we get the water comes up very quickly and it goes down very quickly. It's very dirty. I like to call this ecological farming. This is where we do no-till and a cover crop. And you'll notice what will happen is the water comes up much slower. It's clearer. And it'll go down goes down very slow too. So we get a longer stream of water coming out at a much slower rate. We carry a lot less nutrients, a lot less sediments with that, okay? Here's something. What about temperatures? This is what your cover crops do also. This came from Dr. Taylor out at Iowa. At 75 degrees Fahrenheit, if you measure the top couple inches of your soil, you're going to use 1 acre-inch of water on corn per week, okay? If at 85, you double it, it goes to 2, and at 95 degrees, you need 4 times more water in order to produce the same amount of yield, okay? And how much is a 1 acre-inch of water worth? It's roughly equal to about 8 bushels of corn, about 6 bushels of wheat, and about 3.5 bushels of soybeans. And if I just do that on corn, 8 bushels of corn at $4 a bushel, that's worth about $32 an acre, okay? So just giving you a little bit of number there. Let's talk a little bit more about the compaction. We're only gonna hit the red parts. 80% of your soil compaction comes from wheel traffic, occurs on the first pass after a tillage pass, okay? This is Randall Reader's data. And then here was another one on a slide. I wanted to combine them down. Compaction can reduce your yields up to 60%, and it can last for as long as 9 years in your soil. It's a great reason why we should minimize our traffic on our fields. If at all possible, try to use controlled traffic. I have a guy from Australia. His dad decided, great big huge farm. One field was close to 10,000 acres, okay? And his dad went across, put some fertilizer on, ran out of fertilizer, turned around in the middle of the field and came back on a track. You could still see it 4 to 5, 6 years later on a satellite image. I guarantee you the sun never lets him forget that he did that, okay? Now, it depends on how far you have to go, right? But apparently he wasn't too far from the end. He could have just drove to the end and drove around, but compaction will show up on your satellite images for quite a long period of time, okay? We can see that. Here's where water's uptake and nutrient extraction occurs because the nutrients kind of flow with the water. roughly, these are rough numbers, and it depends on your soil and the depth of your roots, but roughly about 40% of your nutrients and water come from that top 6 inches. Another 30% come from your 12-inch layer, 12 inches down, about 20% at about 18, and about 10% come really deep, all right? Now, on some soils, if you have a sandy soil, you could probably just expand that down to maybe 30 inches or 36 inches. The roots have a lot less density go through, and they can get down through that, so you can just kind of do it proportionally for a soil that has a little bit better, more sand in it, okay? So that just shows you some things going on. This is one that I kind of like. This is something that I hear all the time. Cold no-till soils, we hear that a lot. What's causing that? It's because you're holding the moisture there. If you've got a compacted layer, you're holding the moisture. It takes 10 times more heat to warm up moisture that's being held in a saturated soil. If you replace that with warm air, it will warm up. That's why when we do tillage, the soil warms up, okay? So if I put in and start no-till, and if I can break up that compaction layer and get that water to drain, I can warm my soil up quicker, okay? What else also happens? If I get a really good soil, or a really good cover crop, like say sorghum Sudan grass, and I start growing that, and I cut that several times, okay? I like to let sorghum Sudan grass get up to about my chin, cut it off maybe about 6 inches to a foot tall. You will get 5 to 10 times more roots, and it turns your soil black. It will add 0.5% organic matter, as much as 75% higher organic matter short term to your soil, and really help with soil compaction. If I have a black soils warm up faster than soils that are very pale, okay? So that's gonna warm your soil. And then if I have a nice thick residue at the surface, and I have a lot of biological activity, there's actually a journal article that showed this. That residue will actually keep that soil, has more biological life. It will warm that soil up. Not a whole lot, just a little bit, but it is just a little bit warmer. So you have 3 ways that you can warm it. If somebody comes to me and tells me that I have cold, wet, no-till soils, I immediately start asking the questions, because they probably have soil compaction. I have guys that when they first start out, they'll say my soils are cold and wet. Then I'll have a guy that will say, well, my soils aren't quite as cold as they used to be, or they're not quite as wet. I'm getting a little better drainage. There's still a little bit, it's a little slow growing yet. And then I'll have guys that are long-term no-till, been doing cover crops a long time. And what do they tell me? My soil is warm and moist. The difference is the amount of compaction and how many of these factors that they've improved their soil on. Our goal is to make our soils like those mollisol soils, those prairie soils, okay? Who's doing that? Can anybody tell me? I'm halfway, so I'm gonna have to speed up. Brazil. Brazil is taking their 25% of their land is now in production out of that rainforest. They take it, they burn it down, they spread the nutrients out, and then what do? No-till and cover crops, and they do just like the prairies. 50% of those roots turn over, add that organic matter to the soil. They started off with, on those oxisol soils, worn out soils, 1%. They're now 2, 3%. Some of them are up to 5% organic matter. They've changed it from an oxisol, and they're moving in the direction of a mollisol soil, okay? What are we doing? Majority of the farmers in the United States, we're tilling our soils. We started off with 5, 6%. Now we're down to 2%. We're going in the wrong direction. How important is that soil erosion to you? Average soil erosion in Virginia, coastal plains, 2.5 ton of topsoil per acre, 2.2 to 2.7. 2.5 is the number I'm going to use. That's 5,000 pounds of soil. If I get 50 bushel soybeans at 60 pounds a bushel, that's 3,000 pounds of nutrients harvested. Divide 5,000 by 3,000, and I'm at about 1 2/3. The ratio is I'm losing 1 2/3 pounds of topsoil for every 1 pound of soybean I produce. Is that sustainable? Makes you think, doesn't it? Okay, so always gets me, just sorry about that, always gets me just a little emotional, okay? Sorry about that, but it does. It just brings a tear to my eye every single time. I'm gonna kind of just do this very quickly because I'm already about the half point, but I'm gonna cut out some of the cover crops since Ray did such a good job on that. Building soil structure is like building macro aggregates. You want to build macro aggregates, not micro aggregates. Macro aggregate is like building a house. That's like that black cottage cheese in the soil. When you take that soil and it just crumbles and it's black, you all know what good soil looks like. So we start off with the clay, and that's our foundation. And then we got the wood, which is the roots. And look at this building right here. We got all these steel girders, and we got this wood, and we got this pore space, okay? And then we have the braces, which are your nitrogen and your sulfur. And then you got the nails or the steel girders, which is that long-term organic matter. And then you have the insulation, which is the glomalin or the glomalin that comes from the mycorrhizae fungus in the soil. And that's what gives us this nice, big macro aggregate. Now, what happens if I have a tornado come through and take off the roof of my house? What's going to happen to my house? It's going to rain in there, rot out the wood, and the house is going to collapse, and we're going to have a lot of soil compaction, or compaction in that case. It's not the water that comes through the soil that causes the problem. It's too much oxygen, which oxidizes the wood, and pretty soon our soils start to collapse. Just like that soil organic matter. Remember that 6 to 9 inches we lost? We're oxidizing, burning up the carbon, and now our soils are getting more compact. Now our roots can't get through it. Now we can't grow the crops. Now we can't get that air exchange, gas exchange that we want in the soil. Okay, so that's what that's all about. All right, now I got to really speed it up. I'm down to 19 minutes. Last one on soil compaction. This came from Penn State. This is Dr. Stuart Dykert. How many have seen this slide? Anybody? Okay, just a few. Here's what he did. We're starting in the right-hand corner, then we're going to go to the left, then we're going to go up to the upper right, and then over here. He started with a subsoil. He subsoiled this field. They tilled it, and this ground is squishy when wet. It's hard when it's dry, and the ruts are 6 to 12 inches. After 1 year of no-till, the ruts now, he did this on 4 different fields. He had them in 4 different stages, okay? And this was all the same soil type. The ruts were only 3 to 6 inches deep. On 2-year no-till, the ruts now are 1 to 2 inches deep. And when he went to long-term no-till, what did he have? You barely see any ruts there. It's firm when it's wet, soft when it's dry. The ruts are barely visible. Which one of these would you prefer to have? If it was raining 2 inches and coming down cats and dogs, which one of these fields would you want to drive across? You want to drive across the one that's long-term no-till and probably had cover crops on it too, okay? That's going to give you more structural stability. We're done with soil compaction, okay? We're going to really skip this because you guys know what grasses, you know what the legumes do. Ray did such a good job on this. The one that I might point out, have any of you guys seen yet? There's a new variety out there called Tapit, T-A-P-I-T. It's a crossbred brassica. I think it's a crossbred between, I'm not quite sure if it's kale and rape or if it has some radish in it, but it has some of those characteristics. We just got it out. We're just starting to experiment with it now. You might look for it. Might be something that you can add to your mixture, okay? What do the grasses do? They supply mainly carbon, but they're really good at supplying the phosphorus. The legumes supply nitrogen. Your grasses are going to supply phosphorus, okay? They help us with the horizontal compaction. Those fine fibrous roots are really good at providing habitat for the microbes, and they promote good soil structure, okay? Legumes, we pretty much know what they do. They got a little bit longer taproot. They help provide nitrogen, but they do acidify your soil. So you got to be a little bit careful because they do tend to lower your pH, okay? And they have a little bit less root mass. Going to skip this one. You've probably seen all these. There is differences. I don't know if Ray touched on this. I'm just going to touch on it briefly. If you're going after wheat, you have a whole lot of more options because you have warm season broadleaves and warm season grasses that you can plant. Most of these are all going to die with the first frost. The ones that I like are the ones in bold: cowpeas, sun hemp. Buckwheat is non-mycorrhizal. Sunflower is highly mycorrhizal, okay? But those are all really good pollinators. We like to get those in a mixture if at all possible. On the warm season grasses, my most favorite one was the sorghum, which I just told you about, but also oats. Oats is highly mycorrhizal. I don't know if you guys know this, but back in the 30s, might have been the 40s, there was a major disease infected oats and they put in a new gene. It made the roots real leaky. And because it was leaky, it allowed tremendous colonization by bacteria, beneficial bacteria, but also beneficial mycorrhizae fungi. So oats and sorghum. The only thing I don't know is whether that's in black oats, Jerry oats, or any of those other type of oats. I don't know if they bred that in there. If somebody knows the answer, please let me know, because I've had that question multiple times and I don't know. Okay, here are some of the other cool season ones. The one I really like to see if you could get in there would be oats. We got cereal rye, triticale. You've seen all the brassicas. I hear you guys are using a lot of hairy vetch. I really like that. I would suggest maybe trying to put a little bit of hairy vetch with your cereal rye. The reason I say that is there is some guys that have done some experiments by putting hairy vetch in with the cereal rye. It'll grow taller, you'll get more biomass. And when you get that more biomass, you're also forming those mycorrhizal associations that when those beans come up, they can tap right into it. It's already set there. And it also gives you a longer growing season. Some of these very sensitive mycorrhizae need 9 to 10 months of live roots to complete their life cycle. And if you have some of those brassic or some of that hairy vetch in there, it's very similar to your other legume, your soybean. Soybean can tap into that and help increase more pods, taller, more pods per stem, and give you a little higher yield. Okay, and we've talked about this. I'm going to leave this alone because you guys all know that. Three-way mixes, I think he talked about it a little bit. Ray did. I like oats and radish because they die out. That way you only have to manage one other crop, and you could put either crimson clover, hairy vetch, or Valencia in that mix, and then you only have to manage that in the spring. The thing about hairy vetch is it likes drier soils. Valencia has a hollow stem. It will tolerate wetter soils, and crimson clover is kind of somewhere in between. Okay, so that's the difference between those three. Here's a 10-way mix. I don't expect you guys to do all these. You guys would all make up your own, but you can see we have a whole diversity of summer annuals and winter annuals in there, and that's what you want. You want to have this diversity, and you want to have these different types of organic matter, different depths, and they don't compete with each other. They actually can help each other. The legumes are going to supply some nitrogen. The grasses are going to supply some phosphorus. We'll get some extra micronutrients probably out of those brassicas, according to Ray, okay? And they can share some of these nutrients back and forth. So you end up with a lot more biomass. Now, this is for Ohio. I don't know if this applies to you, but a lot of times we're looking, instead of pounds, we're looking at seeds per square foot. And our goal in Ohio is 30 to 40. I don't know if that applies to you guys, but we're looking at 30 to 40 seeds per foot. Just a couple of things. Seed size does matter. The smaller the seed, the shallower you want to plant it. You need to know the number of seeds per pound you have. And larger seeds, you want to plant a little bit deeper. It really works well if you've got one of those grass planters, small seeded distributors at the top. Okay, and then have the larger ones can go in where you can put them in a 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep. Okay, we have seen some research that shows it does help if you plant the small ones deep. Some of the bigger ones will do it, but if you really want to get a good stand, just dribble it over the surface, especially those really, really tiny ones. And if you get a good 1 inch of rain on it, 1/2 inch to 1 inch of rain will get some of those small ones started. The biggest problem is you got to have another rain after that to keep them so they grow in the fall. And I know you guys are concerned. I've heard this. You guys plant. We try to plant in September. You guys are trying to plant 1st of October, I understand, till about the end of October. I would encourage you to try to get as much biomass as you can, okay? Why is that? Because if I could harvest that, either graze it or bale it, or mow it, for that matter, what happens to the roots? The more roots you get, that's how you're going to break up your compaction. 50% of those roots will die off, and then they'll regrow again. That's how you're going to build your organic matter back in your soil. That's how we got those prairie soils. The reason our soils here are so shallow and only 6 inches deep is because we had oak trees and the roots only turned over about once every 100 years. Okay? That's why when you go out in the prairie, Brazil is doing it. They're doing these annual covers. They do get 60 inches of rain, and they're right on the equator, so they have a lot of benefits there. They're starting off with an oxisol, worn-out soil, and they're turning it in and moving it towards a mollisol soil, okay, which are your dark black prairie soils, all right? Let's keep going. I'm going to skip this. You already know what works best after that. For manure, we really like the grasses. They do the best. I'll just go to that. You got to be a little careful with radish, because if the radish die out, we did some research in Ohio, had a great stand of radish, 8 to 10 pounds an acre, way, way too high. Okay, what happened? We got about down to 10 degrees, even 0 in January, and then it got up to 60 degrees. P.U. Boy, did they stink, okay? And what happened? They all turned to elephant snot. That's what I call it. And then we got a 2-inch rain. What happened to all the nitrate? Washed right down into that root, went right into our tile. We had one of the highest nitrate levels we've ever had. You guys might get away with it a little bit more than we do. We tend to have a little harsher winters than you do. If your radishes are surviving the winter, that would be fine. It would be great, but if they don't survive the winter and you get a really hard frost, don't be surprised if some of those nutrients don't leach out. And I think, Ray, you would probably agree with most of what I said there, at least half, 10%. Passing grade, please. Okay, all right, thanks. All right. All right, I've already talked about this. Benefits of crimping. Okay, somebody wanted me to talk about crimping. I have 9 minutes left. Why do I like crimping? Well, I sell the crimper rollers, but I liked them before that. It helps reduce the natural weed control. You can reduce the amount of glyphosate. Now, we'll try to touch on that. It lowers your burn down herbicide costs. It will help control a lot of these hard to control weeds, the mare's tail. We have a lot of problems in Ohio with water hemp. I heard a little bit about Palmer amethrin, thistles, and foxtail, especially if you get enough biomass out there. It increases your organic matter. You've got it all at the surface, and as that residue breaks down, you're releasing that carbon dioxide up into them corn plants or those soybean plants as it breaks down during the growing season. That's exactly what we want to happen. We do have cooler temperatures, but during the summer, that's a good thing, okay? And if we have, hopefully we don't have the cooler temperatures in the spring. If we do, we know that's probably related to soil compaction, and these are gonna help break up your soil compaction if you've got a good cover crop out there. It conserves moisture, increases infiltration, you have less compaction, improves soil structure, reduces erosion tremendously. Does anybody know what the natural rate of soil erosion is? It's we replace soil at about 1,000 pounds per year. How do you do that? You do that by the rocks coming to the surface, breaking down into sand. Sand breaks down into silt. Silt breaks down into clay, and that's how you form soil. So we could only lose 0.5 ton per year if we want to stay even. One of the benefits of these cover crops is if you guys are having problems with stones, especially if you're doing tillage, you're going to get a lot more stones coming from the surface. Why is that? Because it freezes deeper, and just like a fence post, when it thaws, it moves all the rocks up to the soil surface. Then you have to get them in your combine or into your equipment, and we don't want them there. If you start growing the cover crops, you can actually start to bury those just a little bit. You get the residue over them. Maybe you're not going to hit them. Now, it might take a few years, all right? But you may not see as many stones on the surface that you did before, okay? Higher microbial biomass. I'll tell you what, if any of you have ever been on a crimper at 8 to 10 mile an hour, it's a lot of fun, okay? So that is one thing. It is fun to do. We see 5 to 7 bushel higher yields. How do we do that? We crimp our soybeans when they're 4 to 5, even 6 inches tall. And when we do that, that's about like putting Cobra on them. It causes them to bush out and have more pods, okay? So you can actually do it on corn all the way up to about V4. At V5, you'll start to see some damage because maybe some of the plants got germinated maybe a day earlier, and they'll be at V6. By V6, you'll wipe out the crop because the growing point's coming out of the ground, and so you can't crimp any later than about V3 to V4 on corn, and you won't hurt your corn, okay? And then what else does it do? It also helps to improve nutrient density by having those cover crops out there, okay? Some things. This is what they typically look like. I know a lot of you guys are crimping right when you plant. I would say you might possibly, I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna theorize here for just a second. You might be able to get out another week earlier on those cover crops. Maybe you should be planting another week earlier and then coming back at a later date and trying to crimp. And we all know that if you can get that crop out there a little bit earlier, we've got a longer growing season, and that can be very beneficial for yields, especially the moisture. The biggest thing I see on corn, one of the myths about corn is that early maturing corn yields less than later maturing corn. Research at Ohio State says that that's a false statement for one simple reason. Dr. Peter Thomason did the research. He said it all depends on moisture at pollination. If I can get this planted early and catch some beneficial early rains, especially at pollination, you can have very high yields on short maturity corn, very short day corn, okay? Whereas if I plant early or late maturing corn first, wait 2 or 3 weeks, and then plant the early maturing corn. That's typically what happens in Ohio. Then what happens? Well, it's 3 weeks behind the other. The other one's got a much better root system, so of course it's gonna yield better. It can tolerate those heat. So if you really want to do a fair test, plant an early maturing and a late maturing at the same date, same time, same conditions, and then watch the weather and see when the moisture occurs, okay? 4 minutes left, so I gotta move along. Why do farmers like it? It's fast, it's affordable, it's fun, okay? Falls with crimping, you wait too long, you can dry it out. You a lot of times gotta wait till it's in that reproductive mode. Crimping does not always work on rocky ground, uneven ground, if it's too steep. If it's too wet or too dry, you can't do it. If there's not enough biomass, it doesn't crimp very good. Or if you just wait too long, okay? So those are some problems. I have some tips. You can go to my website. I'm gonna skip that so I get to this last one, glyphosate, okay? Now, I'm not gonna say a lot about glyphosate, but I'm gonna use most of my remaining time on the glyphosate. What we're seeing out there is glyphosate is a chelator. Okay, it was used in the 30s and the 40s. They discovered that if you want to clean out your pipes, it'll take out all the mineral nutrients because it ties them up and binds them real tight. Okay, guess what? Does the same thing in the soil. Now, if you go look at the research, what does the research tell you? Research will tell you that Roundup breaks down in 30 to 40 days. Absolutely correct. 30, maybe 50 days, depending on moisture, could be 60 days, all right? But what they don't tell you is that the metabolites hang around. And the metabolites are those action sites that can chelate micronutrients. What micronutrients does it like to chelate? The biggest one it has the highest affinity for is iron. Why do we want to have iron in the soil? Because iron activates the chlorophyll enzyme, okay? And magnesium is the other one it has a high affinity for. Magnesium is the central element in your chlorophyll, okay? And so that's why you want to have, you got iron, you got magnesium, but you also have zinc and copper and nickel, okay? Even calcium has a plus charge, and it will tie up calcium, okay? So we don't want to do that if at all possible, all right? And here's what happens. Here's a new one out there. It's a little bit like an octopus. Imagine an octopus. It's got a head. You can cut off the head and kill that octopus, but you still have 8 tentacles on there, and each one of those tentacles has 8 action sites, suction cups. So until I chop that head off, and then chop those arms and separate them out, and then destroy each one of those suction cups, this can last in the soil for 728 days that it's tying up micronutrients in your soil. And here's the one that I want you to look out for. It was done by the University of North Carolina, some research down there. It's called Harpy Bio. It's an organic herbicide, has 3 modes of action. It's 3 separate chemicals in it that are natural, so it can be used on organic farms, okay? I don't know the cost yet. They're releasing it this year. They're doing some limited trials on it, and if it's available, it should be available probably next year on a much wider distribution, okay? And that's one that I think we ought to all be looking at. Last thing, I have 38 seconds. Why do I think this might be a problem? Do me a favor. When you go back about mid-July, start looking at your soybeans. Soybean yields, 26 seconds. We've gone off, okay, and have peaked at about 60, 65 bushel across the United States the last 5 years. We use Enlist soybeans, and most guys are putting on 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 applications of Roundup. When you do that, you change the microbial community for about 6 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks, it'll drop and it will recover. And then if I wait maybe a week or 2 and then spray it again for weeds, it drops down again and comes back. Look for your soybeans. I'm down to 9 seconds. Look for somebody doing this to you, okay? Look at the top trifoliate and you'll see a leaf going straight up. If you see that leaf going straight up, I think that is related to Roundup, and it will look like Charlie Brown's Christmas tree. You'll see that the pods have thinned out on the top, and you'll also see on the bottom, we typically see manganese deficiency, calcium deficiency, zinc deficiency, and I'm associating that with Roundup. That's my theory. I have no proof yet, but I would wish you guys would help me. Thank you very much for having me. I'm 47 seconds over. Thank you.
We want to offer an opportunity for questions from the audience. We've got time for 1, maybe 2 questions for Jim Hoorman. Obviously, a wealth of knowledge here. And if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll have a microphone in front of you and we'll address that question. Amazing information, Jim. Really is.
I must have befuddled either that or they can't understand my accent.
Well, we got a few Hokies in the room, I suspect, right? With the Buckeyes?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Little excited about Virginia Tech football this year.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. We have a tough schedule this year. So if nothing else, we'll talk football, okay?
Thank you, Jim.
All right, well, thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.